All right, let's jump right in. Right now, as you're watching this, something amazing is happening inside pretty much every single cell in your body. It's an ancient, super powerful process that's turning the food you ate into pure, usable energy. Today, we're going to crack the code on that exact process, glycolysis. It's the absolute first step in how life, well, gets its power.
So it all boils down to this one really cool question. How in the world does a single tiny sugar molecule, just one, manage to power something as incredibly complex as a living cell? I mean, think about it. Well, the answer to that amazing biological puzzle is glycolysis, and it's a brilliant 10-step journey.
Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's start with the big picture. What's the whole point of this? Simply put, it's all about making energy for everything a cell needs to do to stay alive. So what is glycolysis? Well, the name itself actually gives you a huge clue. Glyco means sugar, and lysis means to split. So glycolysis is literally sugar splitting. It all goes down in the cytoplasm of the cell. And here's the really crucial part. It doesn't need any oxygen to work. That's a huge deal, and it's why scientists think it's one of the oldest, most fundamental energy pathways in all of life on Earth.
Okay, so what's the game plan here? Glycolysis basically has three main jobs. First, you take one big glucose molecule, that's a 6-carbon sugar, and you snap it in half to make two smaller 3-carbon molecules called pyruvate. Second, you capture some of that energy as ATP. Think of ATP as the cell's version of cash. You can spend it right away. And third, you capture some high-energy electrons with a molecule called NADH. This one's more like a rechargeable battery. You're storing that power to use a little later.
So, how does the cell pull this off? Well, it uses a strategy that you might have heard of before, maybe in business class. You know that old saying, you have to spend money to make money? That's exactly what's happening here. The cell has to invest a little bit of energy up front to get a bigger payoff later. And this breaks it down perfectly into two main phases. First, you've got phase 1, the energy investment phase. This is where the cell spends 2 of those ATP cash molecules just to get the glucose ready to be split. But then you hit phase 2, the energy payoff, and this is where the magic happens. The cell makes a whopping 4 ATP molecules, so it gets its initial investment back and turns a profit. Yeah, it's just like this. Think of it like spending $2 to get a process started, but you end up earning $4 back. That's a net profit of $2. For every single glucose molecule, the cell gets a clean profit of 2 ATP. It's a simple and very profitable energy deal. Okay, so now that we've got the big picture, the 2 phases, let's zoom in and look at the actual 10 chemical steps that make this whole thing work. All right, here we go with phase 1, the investment part. In step 1, the cell spends its first ATP. This basically acts like a lock on the door, trapping the glucose inside the cell. Then, after a little rearranging, we hit step 3. This one's a biggie, the point of no return. The cell spends its second ATP, and now that glucose molecule is fully committed to finishing glycolysis. After that, in step 4, snap, the 6-carbon sugar is split right in 2, leaving us with 2 3-carbon molecules all prepped and ready for the payoff phase. And now for the good part, the payoff. And remember, from here on out, everything happens twice because we have 2 of those 3-carbon molecules. Right away, in step 6, we charge up those 2 NADH rechargeable batteries. Then the cash starts rolling in. We get 2 ATP in step 7 and 2 more ATP in the very last step, step 10. So that's our 4 ATP total, and we're left with our final product, 2 molecules of pyruvate. Of course, each one of these 10 steps has its own special enzyme that makes it happen. And I know, trying to remember all 10 of those names can feel a little intense. But don't worry, biochem students have a super handy and kind of silly trick for it. It's this mnemonic. Hungry pirates pick all the greatest pickled pumpkins ever picked. Seriously, the first letter of each word lines up perfectly with the first letter of each enzyme. It's a lifesaver, trust me. All right, so after that whole 10-step chemical roller coaster, let's take a breath and do the final accounting. What did the cell actually get out of that one little glucose molecule? First up, the most important part, the profit. We have a net gain of 2 ATP molecules. That's our spendable cash ready to power the cell. Next, we've got our 2 NADH molecules. Remember, these are our fully charged batteries, holding a ton of energy that's going to be cashed in for a much bigger ATP payout down the line.
And finally, we're left with 2 molecules of pyruvate. This is what's left of our original sugar, and believe me, it is still packed with a ton of potential energy, which leads us right into what happens next.
You see, the story is definitely not over. That pyruvate we just made is now standing at a huge fork in the road. And which path it takes next all comes down to one single critical question. Is there oxygen around or not?
And these 2 paths are totally different. If there is oxygen available, we call that an aerobic condition. Then pyruvate heads into the mitochondria to start a whole new set of reactions that are going to generate a massive amount of ATP, way more than we just made. But if there's no oxygen, that's anaerobic, the cell has to do something else. In our muscle cells, for example, it converts pyruvate into lactate. That's what contributes to that muscle burn during an intense workout. In yeast, that same process is called fermentation, and it's how they make ethanol.
So as you can see, glycolysis is really just the beginning of the story. It's the process that cracks open that first glucose molecule for a quick hit of energy. But in doing so, it creates pyruvate, and that pyruvate molecule holds the key to unlocking a ton more energy, which leaves us with the next big question. What happens next? Where does that key unlock the next door?